So we'll start with the Python. So as we start with the Python, we should know, right? Python behind the scenes, how it works. So as of now, what we know, we will be giving, or let's say we'll be writing one specific program. Okay. So let's say, hmm. So what we do generally, let's say I wanted to print an statement. Okay. So let's say print hello world. Okay. So this is my program, let's say. So what we know, so we write a Python program, let's say .py. Okay, we write this and we execute this. We runs this, right, and we get the output. And in the console, what we see, hello world, right? We will see this much. So we write the program, print hello world, and once we execute it, it gives us the output as hello world. This is what we know. But what I believe, right, before going into the language itself, you should know how in the backend it works, right? What are all the different applications are present to give you this output, right? And why we have to write in this way only? Why can't we write in a different way? So we have to understand these small things first before going into the topic itself, or let's say language itself. So that part actually we will be learning now, like how if I give this file as hello world, and and if I run this program, how it is giving me the output. So before like after running this and before getting the output, what are all the steps that are present, that we have to understand. Okay, so we'll be understanding that part. So as of now, see, normal files, right? Like say text file. So we do have an extension, right? Let's say for text file, we do have .txt, right? For image file, we can have JPEG or PNG, right? Same as for, let's say, doc file, we do have docx, right? So all these are extensions for any file type. Same way, coming to the programming language, right? For any programming language, even there is a extension for it, right? So for, let's say, C, we do have .c, right? And let's say C++, CPP. Same as for Java, we do have .java. Same way for Python also, we do have extension as .py. So any file which have this extension as py, we call that as a Python file. Okay, is that clear, guys? As of now, any questions so far? So Python file should end with this extension .py. Okay, now the next thing, sir, why we have to write any programming language? Here if you see print hello world, so this we can able to understand it, right? Yes or no? Print hello world. So by seeing this only, we can understand that, okay, so this is a statement in Python which actually prints this string. As of now, just consider string is nothing but group of characters, okay, where h is one character, e is one character, l is characters. So group of characters is nothing but a string. Okay, so what print does is whatever we will be giving it to the we will be passing it inside the parenthesis as a string, it will print that. Okay, but why we have to write it in this way? Does the same thing will be understood by the computer? Yes or no? What you guys say? Will the
No,
same print statement will be understood by the computer? No. Why?
no.
Why no?
It is converting to it will take a binary language only.
Exactly. See, computer cannot understand this, high level languages. Okay. So what do you mean by a high level language? Okay. So high level languages are those languages which are near to the human understandable language, right? So this you can understand it clearly, right? Print hello world, right? Yes or no? You can understand it or not? So since the language which are understandable by the humans, or let's say which are nearer to the humans, are nothing but high level language. Clear, guys? What do you mean by high level language? The languages which are nearby to human understandable language. Okay, those languages we generally call it as a high level language. So the same language, that is high level language, machines cannot understand. Why? Why? Because since these high level languages are meant to be understandable by the humans, and they are not meant to be understandable by the computers or machines. Why? Because machines can only understand binary languages. Okay. When I say binary, zeros and ones. Okay. Got it? So machines can only understand zeros and ones. That is what we call it as a machine level language, or even it's called as low level language. Okay. So see, we understand a high level language. Why? Because we cannot understand zeros and ones. The same thing, if I write it in zeros and ones, will we able to understand? No, right? That's why for us, it's HLL, and machine understands only MLL, or let's say machine level language or low level language or binary language, we will say. Okay. So if let's say if you have any application, right, you do have .exe file. So what we call it as executable file. So executable file actually contains all the binaries of all the, packages. So it contains binaries of all the packages. Have you ever tried, .exe, right click, open with notepad? Have you have you guys ever tried?
Yeah.
If
That's
you
what.
yeah, if you tried that, what you will see some garbage amount of,
Yes, it is something numbers. It's maybe
yes. So
not.
it will be having a lots of garbage values and all. That .exe file is meaningful for the computer, not for us. Right. So how when we see that .exe files, if you open it with notepad and we see the garbage values, or let's say some other values, how they look us to us, right? The same way, if we pass the same thing, right, high level language to machine, they will feel the same way. So there needs to be a bridge which can be a, like which can convert from this HLL to MLL or LLL. Okay. So that's where we need an application, which we generally call it as compiler, or we call interpreter. Okay. So compiler or interpreter are the applications which actually converts the high level languages to what? Your machine level languages. Okay. Clear so far, guys? Are you feeling good as of now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Any questions so far?
No, we are good.
No.
Great. So these are the applications, right? Compiler and interpreter. So if these does the same thing, why we need two kind of application? Do you guys know what's the difference between compiler and interpreter? Any guesses from your end? Okay, no worries.
No.
See, what we know that both are used to convert high level languages to binary languages. Okay, that's we know. But how they convert is what, make them two different applications. Okay, so let's say you have a Python file which have, let's say, 10 lines of code. Okay, if the application, if the application, let's say compiler, or let's say if an application which takes all these 10 lines at once and converts that into the binary language, right? All the 10 lines at once. So this is what compiler does. So what compiler does, it takes the whole, uh, high level language file and then converts everything into it as a binary file at once. But how interpreter will work? Interpreter will convert line by line. So it will take one line, it will convert into machine level language. It will take second line, it will convert that into machine level language. Take third line, it will convert the machine level language. So see, if you see the difference, what compiler does? Compiler basically takes the whole file at once and then converts at once. But interpreter, how it works? Takes line by line and converts into machine level language. You can see the difference, right? Whole
Yeah.
at once and line by line at once. So that's how it, these both are different. See, at the end of the day, both are actually doing what? Both are actually doing what? Basically, they are, converting high level language to machine level language, right? But how they do it differs them, like, with each other, right? So now, second part we have to understand. So Python is what? Compiler based language or interpreter based language? Any idea? Or anytime you guys have heard about this?
It's an interpreter language.
Yes, correct. So everyone says that Python is an interpreter language. Okay, most of the guys will say Python is interpreter language. Okay, we will understand that part. Okay, I am wiping out this part. Good to go. Any questions so far, guys, in this part? No, right? Okay. So see, now we what got that .py we do have and the output that we have, right? In between we have to understand, right? So this is input and this is what we get the output. What most of the guys what we think that Python is an interpreter language where each line of the Python is converted to the binary language, but actually it is not. Okay, Python is interpreter plus compiler, compile language. Okay, so it is both. It is not only interpreter. Why? Because see, inside the interpreter, right, there is a compiler. So this is our Python file, which is actually a high level language, and mostly, not mostly, everything will be written in Python syntax, right? So we will be providing that to our interpreter. Okay, interpreter, what it does, it will give to the compiler, but before giving it to the compiler, it will convert, interpreter will convert this Python file to C file. Why? Because the Python that we know, right, it is actually built upon your C compiler. That's why whatever you write the Python file, or let's say Python program, it will be converted into C code. Okay, that's why for every Python file that you create, right, you do have .pyc file for it, right? So this C is for C part. So what interpreter will do, it will take the input as Python file, and before giving it to the compiler, it will convert the whole program from Python to C. That is nothing but your .pyc. Okay. Now this C file will be taken to the compiler, and then it will generate, sorry, this is not .pyc. Okay. So this C code will be converted to your, or let's say given to the compiler. That compiler, which is again based upon your C based compiler, it will give you the .pyc file, which is actually your executable file for Python, which actually consists of zeros and ones. Clear till this point now, guys? Any questions so far? So we give the Python file to the interpreter. In interpreter, what it does, it converts the Python file to C file and gives this C file to the compiler, which is actually a C compiler. Okay, and C compiler will give such what PYC, that is nothing but our binary file. Now, how we will get the output, right? So this binary file will be given to the PVM, what we call it as Python virtual machine. Okay, so this is what Python virtual machine. Okay, so this executable file, that is .pyc file, will be given to the PVM, and PVM is responsible for the output that we see in the screen. Okay, clear? So this is how once you give a Python file to the interpreter and you get the output, but in between this, there are a lot of stuffs will go on, right? So this is what actually, you know, it does in the backend. The Python engine does in the backend. Okay. Any questions so far, guys? Yes, no? Clear? Not clear?
Yeah. Clear for me.
Yeah. Swati?
Fine.
Good, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Now, see, we know that, okay, so the normal Python that we will normally call, right, Python. So that flavor of Python is actually, as C Python. That flavor of Python is called as C Python. Sorry, C Python is nothing but what we call it as a normal Python. Why? Because this Python is normally based upon the C compiler. So in the same way, we do have other flavors of Python as well, right? So that are like, if the compiler is Java based compiler of Python, that is called as Jython. Okay, same way, if it is taking the help of C# compiler, you know, it is called as Iron Python. Okay, so these are all the flavors that we normally have. C Python, you know, Java Python, Iron Python, based on the compiler that it uses to, you know, give us the output. But normally when we say Python, it is actually flavor of C Python. That's why interpreter actually converts the Python to C before giving to the, you know, compiler. And again, C program, we know, right? It cannot be, it needs actually compiler to convert that into a binary format, right? That's why you will get this .pyc file for every Python file. Okay, clear? So whenever you just save, and if you do any changes to your current Python file, for every time you do the changes, before getting this output, it will go and check, the Python engine will go and check whether it has the pyc file. It will check the timestamp, the timestamps, you know, the timestamp of the Python file and the timestamp of the .pyc file. If it is mismatch, right, that means you have done some changes. And every time you done some changes to your existing Python file, for that this .pyc file will be updated. Then only you will be getting this output. Okay, so this is how your Python works in the backend. Okay, but it's very easy, right? We are writing the program and getting the output, but understanding the backend as well gives you that confidence that you know that, you know, what are the different steps, compiler steps or interpreter steps that actually happens before we getting the output. Okay, so that is the first part, that is our internal mechanism. And most of the time, you know, even these questions can be asked in the interview. Can you explain me how Python works? Okay, very important question, right? So now, but we know that, you know, how Python works. Okay, now we will see little bit of theory part now, like, you know, what Python, when actually it got introduced. So Python actually, you know, like introduced by Guido van Rossum in the year 1989, but actually it is, you know, given to the general public for the usage in Feb 1991. Okay, it took almost like 2 to 3 years of time to just, you know, make sure everything is set and good to go, right? And we know Python is a high level language. And why it is called high level language, we already just now we discovered, right? What do you mean by a high level language and how it is different from your machine level language? Okay, Python is very easy. See, to print as normal statement, right, we can have only write print, and we can provide anything inside these parameters so that it will print that one. But the same thing, just imagine if you wanted to write in C, right? You have to include studio.h, right? You have to include the header part, and then you have to create the let's say class functions, and then you have to, like, what to do, then you have to put print statement, right? Printf, scanf and all. Same thing comes with Java as well, right? There you have to be like, just to print a normal print statement, it needs some 5 to 6 lines of code, right? Where you have to create a class, again you have to create open the parenthesis, closing the parenthesis, then again you have to write that print statement part. I don't know Java, but this part I know that, you know, it needs 5 to 6 lines of code, you know, lines of code to just print a statement, right? Same way in Python, it's very straightforward. Just in one liner, print whatever you wanted to print. You can just put that inside the parenthesis. That's it. It will print out for you. See, that simple, you know, is Python is. That's why it is now recommended by most of the, you know, like experts that this is the easiest language that a beginners can start with, right? That's why Python is recommended as of now to introduce this language to the beginners so that it is very much easy for them to understand all the concept that a software language have, right? Even I heard that, you know, normally in CBSE schools, right, for 11th and 12th we do have C++ and all, right? They now actually, you know, like remove that C++ with Python, right? So now it got removed. C++ got removed from class 11th and like class 12th. Now they have introduced Python for them as well. So that's why it's called beginner's language. And, you know, And even you have saw that, most of the this data engineers and all, right, basically the guys who need this mathematical background, those who comes from the mathematical background, right, the data scientist and all, why they prefer Python over other subjects? Why? Because it's easy to learn for them, because those guys are not, into this software engineering field, right? They are more into the mathematical field. But again, Python makes them very comfortable. That's why most of the time where Python is used for what? Data analytics part. That is the most, that is actually main reason why these data scientists use, or let's say Python used for data analysis part, right? That is the, that's why it is actually, recommended for the beginners to start with. Why? Because very easy to learn, syntax wise also, and even learning wise, it takes less time compared to other languages. Okay. Now, Python is called, or let's say Python is also called dynamically typed language. Okay. Python is also called, or let's say Python is called dynamically typed language. Do you guys know what do you mean by dynamically typed language? Or before that, what is basically static type language? Any idea, guys? Any idea? It's okay.
According to me, it is static means it will be the stable for the particular thing, dynamic it is a variable.
Okay. 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 No
Yeah.
issues. Yep. Swati, anything from your end? You wanna tell?
No, no.
No issues. No issues. Yeah. But as of now, whatever I told, it's clear, right? Any questions
Yes.
on that? Okay. So why it is called dynamic type language? What we have to understand. But before that, we have to understand what is this static type language. Then it will be easy for us to understand dynamic type language. Okay. So we have to understand what is the static type language. Okay. See, in other languages, right, what we generally do, if we wanted to use any, variable, right, again, we'll be having our variable class separately, but not normally when we wanted to use something, right, and we know that we do have few, data types attached to it. Let's say integer, that means your decimal part, right? Again, for float, you do have float. Integer means your whole numbers. Decimals means float, right? And let's say character. This means, your characters, single characters. Again, for string, that is your group of characters. So if you want to create any, variable, and you wanted to store some value in it based on these given data types, right? So you have to tell the compiler, okay, so suppose I wanted to work with an integer, that means a whole number. So I have to tell to the compiler that, okay, so I wanted to work with this data type, that is integer. Okay. So that's why we provide data type int, and this is our variable int a equal to 10. So we are telling the compiler that we are creating a variable that is a, which is of type integer, right? And it holds the value 10. That means we are telling, right, by this statement, we are telling the compiler that, so a is my variable name, which meant to store integer data type. So these data types have the different memory allocation altogether. Okay. Depending upon the size of the bits, that means 32-bit or 64-bit, right? It differs. Right, so let's say for integers, right, so it generally have 2 bytes or 4 bytes. For float, it's 4 bytes. For character, it's 1 byte. And for string, based on the length of the this one, it shows that much amount of bytes. Okay. So if you see, based on each data type, the memory will be allocated for that specific data type. So here for a is a variable name which can store integer, so it will store 4 bytes of memory to store what? This 10. And we know, right, we do have 8421, the binary format of 110, right? 0101, 8 plus 2, 10. So this is your binary form of your integer 10. So this is how it will be stored in the memory. So it takes 4 bytes to store one integer value, right? So this is how we are telling the compiler. If you wanted to store, let's say 10.5, right? So it won't allow you. Why? Because this is having different memory allocation, and integer data type is having different memory allocation, because this space of a meant to store only the integer data type. Apart from that, if you wanted to store anything else, it won't allow you. that's where you will get the error that A is of integer type, not float type. Right. So this is how normal programming languages work. So what we have to mention, we have to mention in before itself, before uses, like before usage of itself, that okay, so I am creating this specific data, let's say variable for this data type that I wanted to allocate the memory for. So we are telling the compiler upfront only, you have to allocate this much this much memory for this data type to store what the value that which I will assign it later maybe. Okay, so we are telling it upfront. But so this is what we call it as static type language, right? Which we are telling upfront only, because we cannot change later. Because see, if you are storing at integer a equal to 10, okay, now you can store only integer values in variable a. You cannot store a is equal to, let's say, Ravi as a character. You cannot store. Why? Because the memory allocation of the string and memory allocation of integer differs, right? So at the time you will get error. So since we are telling the compiler upfront only to allocate how much memory for that specific variable, we call this type of language as static type language. So all the languages like C, C++, Java, C Sharp, so all these are basically are static type language. Okay. But Python, right? Why we call it a dynamic type language? Why? Because in Python, we do not have to define the data type upfront. Okay, we can directly use a equal to 10, or let's say a equal to string, or a is equal to, let's say, 10.0. So see, are we defining anything upfront? Data type? No. So how it is allocating the memory? So how Python machine will allocate the memory for this variable a? That's what we call dynamically typed language. Why? Because depending upon what type of value we are actually storing to this variable a, the memory will be getting allocated. Okay, that too at runtime. That's why we call this as a dynamically typed language. Got it, guys? Any questions? Yes, no? Any confusion?
No, I'm clear with you.
Right? So see, here we do not have to define what data type we wanted to assign with a. Okay, we do not have to. We can use a equal to 10. So depending upon the type of data that we are assigning to this variable, the memory will be allocated at runtime. That's why dynamic. Okay, that's why we call it as dynamic. Clear, guys? So this is what we call Python as dynamically typed language. Why? Because we do not have to mention what the data type that we will be assigning with. See, any other languages, memory allocation will happen, right? Depending on the data type that we will be creating for that specific variable. But in Python, we do not have to mention the data type that we wanted to work with for this variable. Why? Because based on the value that we'll be assigning, the memory will be allocated. Clear, guys, as of now? So we have discussed all these points till now.